All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special interview here on Rickcast. I am absolutely honored to have Owen Shroyer from Infowars joining me tonight, and we're going to be covering a bunch of different topics, but he's been focusing on the Iran-Israel conflict the way that Infowars can, much better than I've been able to do so. And then I wanted to talk with Owen a little bit about the internal struggles that MAGA is happening inside the movement, and how it seems to be this is more of a problem point than the Elon Musk thing even was. People were worried about at that point. Maybe that was a beginning part of the cracks in the fusion in the actual movement, but that kind of healed itself up for one reason or another. People thought it was staged, whatever the case may be. That was a lot less serious than this one, because that one was more policy-based. That was more personality-based, and this is more policy-based. But first of all, Owen, thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out with us, and we're going to make the most of the time you give. And so you've been covering on Infowars, been watching it, especially in light of one of the few places to actually get concrete info on this Israeli-Iran conflict that seems to just be spiraling out of control. And there's a lot of people that are kind of brushing off, saying, trust Trump, trust the plan, everything's going to be fine. But as you've kind of talked about and walked around, I see, and a lot of other people in the MAGA movement who voted for no new wars and took Trump at his word and I do, by the way, that he doesn't want to see people die like in in Ukraine, and that he is a peace president. But in your opinion, how has Trump handled what I feel he got the rug pulled out from under him by the Israelis? I think he wanted that 60-day deal, and then it seemed like on the 61st day, the Israelis just went. And Trump is kind of now saying in the press, or he's leaking in the press, listen, I knew about it the whole time. I got it. I had an idea of what's going on. I feel Trump's being put into a corner that is very, very hard to get out of, where it's either going to be a deal or it's going to be conflict. Your thoughts on just the way this whole thing has sprung out with the Israel-Iran conflict?
Well, I think it's a very important aspect to understand, and that is the aspect of the desperation of Benjamin Netanyahu. And you're not going to hear this story in the American media, because the American media, generally speaking, especially the mainstream media, doesn't do a good job when it comes to covering foreign news. So they really fail the American people on that front. They fail when they cover Russia. They fail when they cover Ukraine. And then by design, they fail mostly when they cover Israel. And most of this has to do with their own geopolitics or their own agendas or the agendas of the people that run these news networks. But when it comes to Israel, there's a major aspect that the American people don't understand, and that's how desperate Netanyahu is. He's about as popular as Joe Biden. His approval rating is 30%. It's actually now a conversation they're having in Israel that it was a stand down on October 7th. So many Israelis have now accepted that October 7th was a stand down. The American media won't even really report on that. They're too afraid to report on that. And his approval rating is at 30%. The Knesset has turned on him. That's essentially the Israeli Congress. The Orthodox Jews are starting to form a wall against him and are turning on him. And so, these are major political influence groups in Israel that are now turning on Netanyahu. And he needs something. He needs a war. He thinks he needs a war to either save his approval rating or perhaps to stay in power, because he's up for re-election and he's not going to win. He's not going to win re-election. It won't happen. It can't happen. So he needs an outlet. So he sees what's going on with Iran as a window for him to start a larger war, cancel the elections, and then drag the United States into a larger war, so he can accomplish, I think, his decades-long agenda of the expansion of the Israeli state and larger control of the region And you could go back to different regime change wars that we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya over the years. But most recently, what we saw in Syria, where these proxy armies helped to destroy Assad's regime, topple the Syrian government, and then they replaced it with a radical Al Qaeda leader who probably answers to Israel, which we're already learning that there's an angle of that as he's basically doing whatever Netanyahu wants him to do as far as the ongoing war in Iran is concerned. So Netanyahu also failed to take the Gaza Strip. He failed to defeat Hamas, and he failed to rescue the hostages. So he's a desperate man. He's a desperate man. None of his agenda is coming to fruition. The Israeli people are turning against him. And more than that, the entire world is turning against him. But I don't think he really cares about that. So he saw an opportunity to get involved in Iran and potentially get another war, another regime change, draw the U.S. into it, and hopefully stay in power. And that is his ultimate goal. So the American people will never hear this from their mainstream media. If you're not looking for alternative sources, if you're not looking for real geopolitical debate and discussion, the average American is not going to understand this dynamic of any of this. Now, you can go on about Israel's influence over our Congress and Netanyahu lying to Congress, lying to the American people for decades about Iran getting nukes, and that is undeniable. And so now there's this blockade in the American media and in the Israel First portion of MAGA, which, by the way, was anti-Trump. I will have everybody here know they were all anti-Trump. You can go back and check the records until it was beneficial for them to be pro-Trump. They were anti-Trump. So now there's this blockade to tell you that, oh, it is in your best interests. It's not like the Bush years. Iran does have nukes. Ignore the facts. We've been telling you this for 30 years and with no evidence, and on and on and on. And so now there's this major intersection of an undeniable truth and undeniable reality, which is Netanyahu is a liar, which is Israel's influence over our politics. And the intersection is that with the media trying to tell you that that doesn't exist. And so it's a real slobber knocker right now. And haymakers are being thrown, lines are being drawn, loyalties are being discovered. And really, it's all right there, wide open for the American people to see. And they can try to deny that this is happening or deny where it's going, but the cat's already out of the bag. And if Israel doesn't get a new leader, and if the Israeli loyalists don't change tact, then Israel will lose all support from America within 20 years.
It's very interesting that you said that, because on Fox News or on One American News, first of all, you're talking about people on mainstream news. Greg Gutfeld, of all people, like Greg Gutfeld. I've met him in person. He's a really good guy. He's now saying, yeah, we know about Iraq. We know about the past, but don't worry about that. Trump's in charge now. And I think you can agree with me. It's not, I do trust Trump. I voted for Trump 3 times. I like the guy. I actually do think he's the peace president. I don't trust the people around him. And I don't trust the fact that since 9/11, Iran has kind of been the golden crown of the regime change policy. And everybody else has kind of been setting up those dominoes. And if everybody thinks that, and this has been one of those things you've been talking about, lines have been drawn, it went from, don't worry, we'll get a deal done, or it'll be taking place, to, yeah, let the Israelis take care of it. They've got this handled. They're wiping the floor with them, to, if you don't support some kind of military intervention, they're going to get a nuke. And then all of a sudden it's going to be in Los Angeles by tomorrow. And this has kind of shifted pretty quickly. And it's kind of terrifying, because any of us that can at least remember Iraq, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And there's a lot of rhyming going on right now with the talking points in this matter. So there's that first part. And the second part is, yeah, online or on Fox or on any of these other places, yes, support for Israel is at an all-time high. You talk to Twitter polls, and I get it, Twitter is not real life, but any kind of informal poll shows support for Israel is at an all-time low across all the demographics below the age, I don't know, would you say 40 or maybe even 50, that this may be in some chances for Bibi and that nexus that he's part of, the last chance to really get American boots into Tehran, if that's the ultimate goal. Because when I hear Trump say ultimate surrender or a real solution, I hear people say, Trump, you did a great job busting those bunkers. We did a great job taking out those sites. We got to secure those sites, because if we don't, we're going to be back in the situation of bombing them for 6 to 7 years. And that's how the regime change line is going to start being presented. Yeah, we can take them out all day long, but if we don't go in there and change leadership, they're just going to have it again. And we're going to keep doing this and again and again. So for the stability of the region and all the other talking points that they like to say, we need to take the leader out. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, if you go back and all the information is available, this is not opinion, this is fact. The exact same talking points and the exact same propaganda was used in the early 2000s to get us into Afghanistan. And probably the better example would be Iraq. Iraq, weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein. Now it's Iran, nuclear weapons, and Ayatollah Khamenei. So it's just like a Mad Lib, and just replace the three key terms, and you'll get the same result. And what I also noticed when I went and did even deeper research, and it's the same voices, which is so crazy. It's Sean Hannity, it's Mark Levin, it's Ben Shapiro. It's the exact same voices. They're even using the exact same attacks against the people that are standing against it, like isolationists. Oh, it's coming to New York, it's coming to LA. Ben Shapiro wrote a piece for WorldNet Daily in 2005, August of 2005, that was why the Iraq war is good for America. And in there, he's attacking isolationists, and he's saying, if we don't do this, we're gonna get bombed. So it's the exact same stuff that they've been telling us. And I think it's the important context that the American people will never see. Unfortunately, I mean, my audience sees it, your audience will see it. But the compilations going around of Netanyahu since the 1980s telling us that Iran is days away from getting a nuke. Now, before I get to the other end of that about Trump and Bush, there's a crazy irony to this that nobody seems to be picking up on. Benjamin Netanyahu, if you believe Benjamin Netanyahu, then Iran has enriched uranium up to 90% to build a nuclear weapon. So if you believe that, that would mean if you're going to attack, if you're going to strike these sites that have 90% enriched uranium or that have nuclear bombs, you're basically going to have nuclear fallout. I mean, it's inevitable. At 90%, you're going to have nuclear fallout. At 60%, you're going to have nuclear fallout. At 30%, it'll be minimal, but it'll still be traceable. So if it's at 90%, you're basically detonating a pocket nuke. Let's call it. You're basically detonating a pocket nuke by blowing up these facilities at 90%. So you're essentially counting on Benjamin Netanyahu being a liar when you blow up these facilities. Because if you really think there's 90% uranium enrichment and nuclear weapons there, then you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't blow these things up because you know about the fallout that's going to happen. You do something way more strategic than that. So you're basically,
that's essentially, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's essentially Buster bunking the North Korean nuclear weapons at the
which
same,
of course nobody's suggesting we do. Right.
Or the Pakistani ones, right?
Exactly. Because of the exact reasons of what we just discussed. So you are betting on Netanyahu being a liar when you decide to attack these facilities, which is betting on Netanyahu being a liar is a pretty safe bet. I'd say that's 99% of the time you're going to win that bet. Now, the difference between Trump and Bush, I do think that is a fair retort. Donald Trump is not George Bush. And I don't think we're going to get the same results from Donald Trump that we get from George Bush. However, we have to understand that, and a lot of people do now, Donald Trump is one man, and it's sad to phrase it this way, but it's true. He's only the president. He's only the president of the United States. And so we've seen how he can be obfuscated and diverted and blocked, and his agenda and everything else. So, there's only so much he can do. And he's got to try to balance all of these things. So even though I know Trump doesn't want to have a war, and even though I have seen Trump avoid a larger war with other escalations in the past, it's still going to be hard for him to avoid it with all the other things considered. And that's what Netanyahu is trying to do. He's trying to force Trump's hand and drag America into this war. Now, if anybody can stop it, it's Trump. I do believe that. If there's anybody in there that can actually stop us from having another disaster of a Middle East policy and Middle East intervention, it is Donald Trump. The question then becomes, does he have the Constitution and does he have the will to stop this from happening against all the different pressure points and all the different levers that Netanyahu is going to be pulling over the next couple of days or weeks to get him to do that? Who knows? And it could be Iran, it could be Israel, it could be anybody. Who knows what type of sleeper cells are in the country? Who knows what type of attacks could already be coordinated? They just got to push the button, give the green light to happen. So anybody could be calling Trump from Israel. Anybody could be calling Trump from Iran and say, hey, you know what? We've got this sleeper cell in New York, or we've got this sleeper cell in LA. You don't do X, Y, or Z. We're going to give them the green light. You're going to have a Las Vegas shooting situation. So why don't you just do what we want? So I'm sure there's some things going on behind the scenes that we don't understand. But to just outright say, "Oh, this is Trump, not Bush," that's a lazy argument. It's intellectually dishonest. There are major things that Trump is up against, just like George Bush. And even though I don't believe Trump wants to get us to war, sometimes you learn that the president can't even do anything about it. In fact, I think maybe George Bush might have been in a little bit of a similar situation. He just capitulated a lot easier than Donald Trump did. So if anybody's going to stop this from getting worse, it's going to be Donald Trump. If anybody can pull off a precision strike that keeps us out of something larger, it's Donald Trump. He's proven that in the past. But if there's anybody that's going to try to get us into this war, it's going to be Netanyahu. So it's going to be an interesting days ahead. And you just hope for everybody, for the Iranians, for the Israelis, and for America, that there isn't a larger intervention and a larger escalation.
So let's follow up on that. That's a great point you're bringing there. There's a feeling within certain corners of the coalition, the MAGA coalition that was built up, that even support strikes, even strikes that would prevent a larger scale invasion, war, conflict, whatever you want to call it, is still a capitulation to Israel, because the feeling is, listen, you didn't want to do this, but you're getting dragged into this, and our foreign policy is now being dictated by a foreign government because we had to do something because they put us in this position. Do you agree with that? Is there any kind of sense to that, or is that just kind of internet rumor and nonsense?
Well, that's 100% right. And that's, at this point, that's unavoidable. My measurement is that Trump basically made his own bet, and he cut a deal before the election. And, it's the Adelsons and it's the Jewish lobby. And he basically cut a deal, and they said, we'll give you all the money you need, and we'll back you 100% to win this election, but just promise us you'll stop Iran from getting a nuke. And so I think in Trump's mind, it's really not, politically, it's not a bad policy. Politically, it's a winning policy. Whether we agree with it or believe that it's a threat or not really doesn't matter. Politically, as an issue, it's a winning issue. Now that doesn't equate to boots on the ground or strikes, but politically saying Iran can't get a nuke is a winning issue. So he's not really making much of a sacrifice there. But the bet that I think he made was, okay, I'll promise that Iran won't get a nuke. I'll win the election, and then I'll be able to negotiate a deal, and I won't even have to worry about it. So I can make this promise, and I can promise no new wars because I can make this deal, and I can also deliver on both of these promises. Well, now that all hangs in the balance. It might even be impossible at this point. It's a very slim chance, but there is a chance, I would say. But now the negotiations didn't work. Netanyahu sabotaged the negotiations, likely intentionally. So Trump's plan of, I can promise no nukes and then get a deal done, and I can promise no new wars because the deal will stop the wars. No pun intended. I think Netanyahu may have blown that up. Now, there's rumors that Trump is going to try to bring Iran to the White House, which certainly Netanyahu will be pulling his hair out and might just start lobbing bombs everywhere if that happens. But I do think there's still a route. I think, too, that the reason why Netanyahu is so panicked is he's actually been left out a lot. Trump has actually cut him off in a lot of ways. Trump has cut off his spies inside the White House. He's cut off of his eyes and ears inside of the White House, at least getting full access to all of this stuff. I'm sure there's still plenty more in there. I know Mark Levin has access to him and is reporting back to Netanyahu every day. Levin would probably gladly put us on a list to be struck right now if he could. He's just gone fully psychotic at this point. He's a madman. Yeah. So I think that Netanyahu knows that if Trump is talking to the Houthi leadership, which he did, if Trump is talking to the Hamas leadership, which he did, and then if Trump is talking to Israeli leadership, which it's rumored he's about to, I think what he's going to find out is that Netanyahu is the liar. And I think that Netanyahu is panicked about this and he's freaked out. And so he has to blow up as many things as possible. He has to fearmonger as much as possible because he knows eventually Trump's going to find out he's a liar, if he hasn't already. I would be surprised if Trump hasn't figured that out already. But that's kind of the stalemate I think Trump and Netanyahu are at right now. And I was hoping you wouldn't start to see battle lines drawn around the world, but now Pakistan has talked about their interest in this. Russia is talking about their interest in this. China is talking about their interest in this. Of course, the rest of the Arab world and Muslim world is talking about their interest in this now. So it's not really reached, beyond a threshold yet, but there's murmurs now. There's grumblings.
Yeah, there is. And I think the real fear on everybody's part, outside of Netanyahu's obviously, is that it's a country of 90 million, as we just found out from Tucker Carlson. We all know now.
92.
90, I'm sorry, even I got that right, 92 million. And the idea is that, well, if we take out the leader, they'll coalesce around the new one and everything will be fine and happiness and rainbows. We know in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, that never happens. That's never the case. You don't want to fracture a country of 90 million with weapons and cash and oil and all these other kinds of things. It'll be an absolute disaster. And that's essentially what Putin said. He said, listen, you're going to destabilize. If you thought Iraq was bad, Iraq's going to be a picnic if you do anything to destabilize Iran. And I think that's something to be really worried about. And that's something that I worry about in the idea of a regime change. American boots, if that was to take place, American boots are on the ground and you're in a country where every single person is going to be radicalized, or most of them are going to be radicalized against whoever's coming in. Remember, they fought Iraq with U.S. support in a 10-year war to a stalemate. So they fought them tooth and nail. And they're not going to be welcoming.
I think the issue here is not necessarily the Iranian culture or people, because Khamenei is not very popular either. They wouldn't mind getting rid of Khamenei. But I think the issue that they're going to face is, how do you fill that? What happens with that power vacuum? Mm-hmm. And the dangerous part of it is, that there's going to be a ton of proxy groups ready to get in there and try to gain that power. And so it's going to be
a fractured civil war taking place for that.
Well, that will be led by proxy groups, is what I'm saying. I don't think it's the Iranian people. I think it's going to be proxy groups, Israel proxy groups, CIA proxy groups. Turkey will likely get involved. I mean, so that's your bare minimum of people. China has huge vested interest in Israel as well. They provide about a third of their oil. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of different interests that are going to have trying to fill that power vacuum. So it's really an unfortunate situation. So at the end of the day, it's the same story no matter where you are. Netanyahu is not a good representative of his people. Khamenei is not a good representative of his people. Trump is a good representative of us, but the deep state is still mostly in charge of our country. So we all have corrupt governments. We all have corrupt leadership. And this is, it feels like we're kind of at the pinnacle of the realization and the how do we fix this?
And just a real quick note, Iran and China have a vested interest in each other. I think you said Israel there for a second.
I'm sorry. Yes. China gets its oil from Iran.
Yeah. Just a quick note for anybody. And so when they try to beat me up in the comments, it's like, no, we got it. So the second part is we'll end on this. So we have the everything taking place on the foreign policy stage, on the world stage. Within the base, you have Tucker representing essentially people that can slow down here, can kind of think this out. And then you have, a really good set of influencers, obviously Fox News, mainstream media. We also have influencers that are now starting to walk into listen, you got to support the president no matter what, no matter the case is. But the fact is, MAGA is a huge coalition of differing opinions, and supposedly the strength. We're not supposed to be a cult. We're supposed to be able to, talk these things out and have these discussions. But the kind of just the waving off of Tucker's points, the points he made with Ted Cruz, or just the points in at all, or anybody else. If you mention that, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this, or maybe we should slow down, you're getting pushback with, you support Iran, or you want Iran to have a nuke, or you want all these things to go bad. And it's just, no, I thought we were able to actually kind of just like sit down and take a breath to talk this out. Instead, we're kind of being told essentially, shut up and get in line.
Yeah, the straw man arguments that it's really all they have. Let me really break down the MAGA coalition phenomenon and what we're actually dealing with. So you have the MAGA base, which is people like me. I don't know about you if you were there in 2015, 2016, but you would be considered the MAGA base. So the MAGA base are the people that have been there since 2015, 2016. And obviously we have a very strong base and a very strong unified front. And you've seen a lot of that in the recent days. People like me and Jack Posobiec and Mike Cernovich and others. And even though we have our differences on issues, we are the MAGA base. And so we still have that unified front when we need it from the MAGA base. Now you have the MAGA newcomers, the MAGA grifters. The easiest way to describe them would be they're basically just fanboys. They're going to vote Republican no matter what. They're going to wear Trump's jersey no matter what. They're going to lick his boots no matter what. And so really these are actually the lowest value people in the MAGA coalition and Trump knows that, because they're going to vote, well, not Trump because he's in his last term, but they're going to vote for whoever Trump tells them to vote for, or they'll vote for whatever Republican. And so those are kind of your grifters and, your MAGA newcomers, and they don't understand the MAGA base because they weren't there. They weren't there in 2016. Many of them weren't even there in 2020. So they don't understand the MAGA base. They really don't even know it exists. They think they're the MAGA base, but they're not. So you've kind of seen those two heads collide in the recent days. But this is where I think this is actually the most important aspect of the MAGA coalition, and where they're going to really hurt themselves if they get involved in a regime change war in Iran. You have the Tulsi Gabbard wing. You have the RFK Jr. wing. You have the Elon Musk wing. And you could probably even say you have the Tucker Carlson wing. And even though on a Venn diagram, a lot of these things might intersect, there's also a lot of outliers in each of these parts of the coalition. So here's what's going to happen. And again, this is where the MAGA grifters and newcomers just totally don't get it. If you get involved in a boots on the ground specifically, strikes, you're flirting with it. Strikes, you're flirting with it, but you might be able to come out clean. Regime change war, you'll break the MAGA coalition. You'll lose the Tulsi Gabbard wing. You'll lose the Elon Musk wing. You'll lose the RFK Jr. wing. And you'll probably lose the Tucker Carlson wing. So what does that mean? That means you lose the midterms. And that likely means that you lose the 2028 presidential election. So a lot of these people like to get emotional, and they're kind of in a cult of personality thing, and they can't actually look at just raw politics. But that's the truth. If you break this coalition, you will lose the midterms. You will. That's just raw politics. That's what the numbers bear out. And so that's why it's so important for Trump not to do it. And he has to ignore the voices that are begging him to, because we have a chance. I believe we have a chance to save our country politically. And it's like ripping off a Band-Aid that's been stuck on with Gorilla Glue for like 50 years. So, I mean, it's not going to be fun, and it's not going to be easy. So that's kind of what we're doing. And we can do it politically with this coalition. We can win elections. We can win multiple elections. We can get even better people in there than we have now. But you have to maintain this coalition in order to do so. If you blow it up with another regime change war, it's over. We're going to go right back to the pendulum going left and right and left and right. You're going to give Democrats power for at least 6 years, I would say. There'll be a 6-year hangover from this. And so this is why it's very important to maintain this MAGA coalition, because we have all the leverage. We're controlling the narrative. And, it's funny, but it's a sign of the times. Israel could blow it all up.
Both figuratively and literally in that regard. So, and that's perfect. I mean, we could go on for a bunch more time, but we're right at the 30-minute mark. So I want to thank Owen Shroyer. Obviously, they know where they are, but if anybody doesn't know where they can find you, let them know where they can.
Best place is on X at Owen Shroyer 1776. You can get a link to my show, owenshroyer.show. And I do a little side hustle, if you will, on Rumble, rumble.com/Owen.
All right. Well, we want to thank Owen Shroyer for joining us today. Folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us. God bless and Viva Cristo Rey.